Rob DeBoer with your Friday fitness tip from Prove It. Part 2 of what I thought would be a 2-part series, probably 3 parts, but let's see how far we get. You know, last week we talked about the most destructive force in the universe. We heard Will Smith, Men in Black, say it was sugar, and they could be right. This week, a little more serious message from Denzel Washington, talking about misinformation in the marketplace, the importance of being first, but not necessarily always telling the truth, and the responsibility that we have to do so.
If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed.
So what do you do?
That's a great question. What is the long-term effect of too much information? One of the effects is the need to be first, not even to be true anymore. So what a responsibility you all have to tell the truth, not just to be first, but to tell the truth.
We weren't first to market with the ketone conversation, but we sure did bring the education. You see, our go-to strategy was always inspired by our initial goal. Inspire people to be the best version of themselves. Customer acquisition through education, and that's what this represents. Not only do we want to educate you, but we think that education empowers you to ultimately become that inspiration to others. So, reviewing last week, we talked about human energy, the fuel sources. There's 2 and only 2, ketones, glucose. How is it measured? It's measured calorically. If something doesn't have a caloric value, it's not human energy. It would just be considered a stimulant. Human energy comes in the form of food, protein, carbohydrates, fats. That food ultimately becomes potential energy, transferred from the food. Once we eat it, it's now energy in our bodies that if we don't use it with our activities, we store it. And we went a step further. We actually explain where we store that excess energy. You know, protein and carbohydrates ultimately become glucose if it's not used. If it's not used as glucose, it's stored as glycogen. And glycogen is stored on those 2 shelves, the little shelf, the liver, the medium shelf, the muscle. Anything that doesn't fit on those shelves goes to the unlimited shelf space we call our fat cells. And so what we wanted to do was break down some of the misinformation and then ultimately give you some education on how you can eat to tap into that best fuel source that unfortunately, that ketone fuel source that we saved for last, but how you can get it now. So let's really quick touch on the polysaccharides, the disaccharides, and the monosaccharides. This is important, and we'll set up part 3 next week, and here's why. Things aren't always as they seem. You know, there's misinformation out there, and I want to specifically talk about this disaccharide we call sugar, as you know it. It's 2 monosaccharides, one glucose, the other fructose. And they both act very differently metabolically in the body. In other words, we want our body to use that energy and not store that energy. And if we store that energy, we want to store it on the shelves, not on the expanded shelf space we call our fat cells. We want to store it in the liver or in the muscle. But here's the problem. Here's the misinformation. Your ketchup, your desserts, your processed foods, and everything in between that's in your pantry. Things that have extended expiration dates. Things that are found on the aisles of the grocery store. They have fructose, also known as high fructose corn syrup. And here's why it's important to lay this foundation this week, is because if we can eliminate that fructose from our diet, and I'm not talking about fructose from fruit, I'm talking about fructose from fruit juice, right? We're not going to eat too much fructose from fruit because it's got the fiber component. It's just something we don't do. It's the overload from processed foods and refined sugars that really is the obstacle that we face. And here's why. That fructose isn't used in any or required by any biochemical reaction in your entire body, whereas glucose is. So if your body doesn't know what it is, what does it do with it? Great question. And it's not as things seem. It's misinformation, because fructose actually can't be stored on the medium-sized shelf, only in the little shelf, only in the liver, and if we've got excess, fatty liver, then we store in the fat cells. Do you see the problem with the overconsumption of sugar? is that we don't get to store it in our muscle. We have to store it in our fat cells. And that becomes a problem when those fat cells become unresponsive to the hormones in our body that says, hey, we need energy, let's release the body fat. Instead, we just go back to the cupboard, we go back to the store, we go back to the carbohydrates, and we refuel and we replenish. And that's the problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to explain how you can access the best fuel source without saving it for the last, and you can do it through our ketone operating system. And here's why this is important. This is going to allow you to experience that fat metabolism fuel source from your very first serving. And it's going to give you it's going to empower you to make better decisions that will ultimately next week show you how to access that stored body fat, to take advantage and not save the best for last. And that'll be our tune in next week. We're going to show you how to eat, what to eat, and what ultimately could be the best things for you to eat. Guys, that's your Friday Fitness video. Hopefully it helped. Hopefully it wasn't too much, didn't come too fast, but it does lay the foundation. I think it does educate, does empower you. Stay away from the sugar, specifically the fructose in the form of high fructose corn syrup. Find short expiration date foods. It doesn't come in a box. It doesn't come in a can. Foods don't have ingredients. Food is the ingredient. So until next week, have an awesome weekend. We'll see you. Take care.